No one was supposed to hear the signal. It was buried in a dead frequency, wrapped in broken encryption, disguised as cosmic noise. But the moment it slipped through the void, it found the one person in the galaxy who never stopped listening. The freighter Iron Promise drifted at the edge of map space, its hull patched with scrap from 10 forgotten wars. Inside, a man named Kade Marrin sat alone, boots hooked over a humming power conduit, pretending he wasn't counting heartbeats in the silence. Officially, Kade was finished with contracts. Unofficially, he survived by running forgotten trade lanes, hauling things no one else wanted, and avoiding people who remembered his name. That was when the ship's antique receiver twitched. At first, it sounded like static. Then pain shaped the noise into words. "Anyone, please. Our sky is burning." Kade froze. He had learned to distrust miracles. They usually wore the mask of disasters. The signal sharpened. A voice emerged, soft, crystalline, cracking with terror. Not human. The translator lagged behind, trying to make sense of grammar that bent around entirely different concepts of time and emotion. "Our shields have failed. Our people are falling into the storm. I am alone." Kade stood so fast his chair toppled. He didn't notice. The NAV computer flared red warnings. The signal's origin point sat deep in a charted dead zone, a region erased from every civilian star map. The place pilots joked about, where ships went missing and insurance companies pretended never existed. He should have cut the channel. That was the rule. Instead, he whispered, "I hear you." The pause on the other end lasted long enough for Kade to think the connection had dropped. Then the voice returned, trembling. "You are real." Her name came through in fractured syllables the translator struggled to approximate. Lyris of the Aurelian Crown. He didn't know what that meant yet. He only knew that her world was dying while he sat safe in the dark. The Iron Promise's computer chimed again, this time with a different tone. Unknown energy surges were registering across the entire sector around Lyris's planet. Whatever was killing them wasn't a war. It was a cosmic event. A star was collapsing. Kade felt the familiar tightening behind his ribs. The old reflex. The one he'd sworn to bury with his past life. He asked the ship for a jump solution. The system returned a single blinking word. "Impossible." "Run it again," he muttered. No safe vector found. He stared at the distant coordinates, glowing like a wound on the navigation grid. Human space doctrine labeled it red silence. The place you never went. The place no one survived. On the open channel, Lyris drew a shaky breath. "Our council says there's no rescue left. They told me to record our ending, to preserve our story somewhere the storm cannot reach." Kade closed his eyes. He had heard too many endings in his life. He had promised himself there wouldn't be any more. Without looking, he reached down and flipped the physical override switch beneath the console, one he'd installed years ago for emergencies he pretended didn't exist anymore. The engines growled awake, louder than they ever had in months. "Lyris," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "You're not recording anything. You're giving me a destination." There was silence again, heavier this time, then a whisper, filled with something that sounded dangerously close to hope. "You would cross the silence for us." Kade smiled without humor. "I crossed worse for less." The Iron Promise angled its battered nose toward a region of space the galaxy had collectively agreed to forget. And for the first time in a very long time, Kade Marrin felt like a soldier again. "Hold on, before we get into the real stuff. I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. Because whatever you're doing right now, everything is about to change for Kade, and for an alien princess who doesn't yet know she just rewrote the fate of 2 species. The jump drive began to scream, and the stars went out. The universe did not like being crossed. That was the first thing Kade realized as the Iron Promise tore through the forbidden sector. Space didn't fold. It resisted. Light bent backward. Time hiccuped like a skipped heartbeat. Every warning system the ship possessed flared at once, their overlapping alarms forming a single metallic howl. Kade gripped the console with both hands. "Stay with me," he muttered, though he wasn't sure whether he was talking to the ship, to himself, or to the trembling voice still open on the channel. "Human, Kade, Lyris said faintly, your star field is unraveling. You must turn back. Not happening, he replied, forcing the jump sequence deeper. You told me your sky was burning. That means I'm already late. The navigation display fractured into shimmering layers, each one showing a slightly different version of reality. In one, the iron promise was intact. In another, it was a drifting carcass. In a third, it simply ceased to exist. He picked the path where the ship was still flying. Micrometeor storm slammed into the hull, not as rocks but as raw, charged debris shed by the dying star ahead. Each impact rattled the frame, knocking loose bolts that had survived decades of abuse. Kade tasted copper and realized he was bleeding from a reopened scar on his cheek. The signal strengthened. Lyris's world emerged from the distortion like a jewel being crushed in slow motion. Its atmosphere shimmered gold and violet, laced with lightning that crawled across the globe like living veins. Whole continents were glowing, not with city lights, but with the heat of orbital debris raining down from shattered moons. Our defense rings are gone, Lyris said. The storm came without warning. The scholars say our star has become a heart of fury. Kade scanned the data flood pouring in from long-range sensors. The readings made no sense. The star wasn't just collapsing. It was accelerating itself, feeding on its own mass in violent bursts, generating gravitational tides that tore through subspace. It was an extinction engine. Your people built evacuation craft, he asked. Yes, she said softly, but the storms disabled our launch corridors. We are trapped beneath our own sky. The ship's computer chimed again, this time with a list of survival projections. None exceeded 20 minutes. Kade exhaled slowly. He had faced impossible odds before. What he had never faced was a planet that couldn't be outrun. Lyris, he said, eyes racing across tactical overlays. I can't stop your star, but I might be able to cheat it. Her answer was barely audible over the static. We do not cheat suns. That's because you've never worked with humans. He rerouted power from the cargo bay to the gravitic clamps normally reserved for hauling derelict stations. If he couldn't move the planet, he could try something insane instead. Anchor a temporary corridor through the storm long enough for mass evacuation. The math was ugly. The risks were worse. Your people need to gather at the polar convergence zone, he told her. There's a magnetic seam there. It's the only place stable enough for me to hold open a corridor. You speak as if this is routine, she said, though awe was creeping into her fear. It's not, he admitted, but it's the best bad idea we've got. The storm intensified as he drew closer, arcs of stellar fire licking across the void between ship and planet. The iron promise's shield strained, bleeding energy in luminous ribbons. Kade forced the ship into a low orbital slingshot, skimming the outer edge of the gravitational maelstrom. Every instinct screamed at him to pull away. Instead, he dove deeper. Inside the cockpit, gravity fluctuated wildly. Kade slammed into his restraints, vision narrowing to a tunnel. Through the pain, he heard Lyris gasp. The sky is changing, she said. The clouds, they are moving toward the poles. Good, he said through clenched teeth. That means the planet is responding. He opened a wideband transmission, overriding every protocol that had ever told him to keep quiet. His voice boomed across alien frequencies, translated in real time by a system never designed for this scale. People of Aurelian, he said, not knowing if anyone could hear him. I don't know your customs or your gods. I only know you deserve more than a silent ending. Move to your northern convergence zones. Bring everyone you can. We're opening a door. The star flared in response, a titanic eruption that bathed the cockpit in blinding white. For a moment, Kade thought he'd failed. Then the gravitational readings shifted. A narrow corridor formed in the storm, unstable, flickering, but real. On the open channel, Lyris's breath caught. You are tearing a path through a dying sun. Don't narrate it yet, Kade snapped. I still have to keep it open. The ship's core began to overload, coolant lines rupturing one by one. Warning lights died as fast as they appeared. The iron promise was sacrificing itself piece by piece to hold back the fury of a star. Kade watched the corridor waver on the display, thinning like a thread under a blade. And then the transmission spiked. Not one signal. Thousands. The first evacuation vessels were lifting off. But the storm was closing. The corridor started screaming. Not in sound, but in mathematics. The kind of screaming only machines understood. Error values cascading faster than any processor could correct. The evacuation thread Kade had forced through the stellar storm was unraveling molecule by molecule. And the Iron Promise was paying the price. Evac vessels are launching, Lyris said, her voice vibrating with disbelief. Our skies are full of light. They are following the door you made. Kade didn't answer right away. His console had gone half dark, whole subsystems browning out under the strain. The ship's reactor core was climbing into thermal territory no freighter had ever survived. Good, he finally said. That means the worst part is still ahead. He rerouted again, this time diverting power from life support. The cabin air thinned, turning each breath into a conscious decision. He'd learned in the service how long a human could function while suffocating. He did not intend to test the upper limit today. The corridor flared violently as the star shed another shell of incandescent debris. One evacuation vessel vanished in a pulse of violet light, erased so cleanly the sensors registered it as a rounding error. Lyris cried out. Don't stop, Kade said, jaw clenched. Keep them moving. The freighter shuddered, its frame bending under gravitational shear that could peel cruisers apart. Bolts tore loose and spun like shrapnel. A cargo crate smashed free from its moorings and exploded against the rear bulkhead, showering the cockpit in sparks. Somewhere in the ship, metal screamed. You will die, Lyris whispered, as if saying it quietly might make it less real. Kade checked the remaining power reserves. He had minutes, maybe less. That's been true a lot of times, he replied. Hasn't stuck yet. He watched the flow of alien craft increase, sleek, organic silhouettes bursting free from a world that had believed itself doomed an hour earlier. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Each one carried families who had been preparing to record their own extinction. Aurelian was emptying, but the corridor was thinning. The star surged again, a convulsive flare that hammered the freighter so hard Kade's restraints tore into his shoulders. For a heartbeat, the corridor collapsed entirely. No, he breathed. The display filled with static. Evac vessels vanished in clusters, their transponders going silent mid-transmission. Human Kade. Lyris's voice cracked, raw with panic. Our launch zones are destabilizing. The storm is breaking through your door. He slammed his fist into the console, more in fury than effect. He needed more mass, more gravity, more leverage than a patched-together freighter should ever possess. And then he remembered what he was hauling. Weeks earlier, he'd taken a contract no one else wanted. Transport of condemned industrial cores from a decommissioned mining array. Obsolete. Dangerous. The kind of cargo you only moved if you didn't care what it did to your ship. They were still in his hold. Kade, respond, Lyris pleaded. He didn't answer. He was already running the calculations. Hands flying over a control interface, never meant to attempt what he was about to do. The industrial cores were gravitational amplifiers. Each one could distort local spacetime enough to stabilize a micro-singularity for mining operations. Together, they were a disaster waiting to happen, or a miracle. He armed the release clamps and began feeding power into the cores, overriding safety locks that had survived 3 corporate audits. The ship's computer protested in every language it knew. Action will result in catastrophic failure. Yeah, Kade said quietly. That's the point. He broadcast on the open channel again, his voice steady despite the blood pooling under his collar. Lyris, listen carefully. I'm about to make this corridor very stable. It will also make this position very temporary. She understood immediately. No, she said. You must not. Our people cannot survive knowing you traded your life for ours. Funny thing about humans, he replied. We're stubborn about the math of hope. He triggered the sequence. The cargo bay doors blew outward as the industrial cores dropped free into the heart of the corridor. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then spacetime folded. The corridor thickened, hardening into a blazing tunnel that cut through the stellar storm like a blade through silk. The gravitational chaos calmed. the star's fury bending around the new artificial anchor point. Evac vessels surged forward, pouring through the reinforced door in endless streams. The Iron Promise, however, was caught in the backlash. Every structural support in the ship groaned. Power spiked beyond the limits of any civilian reactor. Kade watched the core temperature pass critical with eerie calm. On the channel, Lyris was sobbing. "We are almost clear. Please, come with us." Kade looked at the viewport, at the corridor blazing with borrowed physics, at a world emptying itself into tomorrow. "I'm not the one who needs saving anymore," he said. The reactor containment field flickered, and then it failed. The explosion never came. Instead, time fractured. Kade felt the moment stretch, his failing reactor frozen between existence and oblivion, every alarm suspended in a soundless scream. The cockpit lights dimmed into a bruised twilight. His heart continued beating, though the ship insisted it no longer had power to support that particular habit. On the open channel, Lyris whispered his name as if she were afraid that sound itself might finish what the reactor had started. "What just happened?" she asked. Kade didn't answer because he couldn't. The world had become syrup-thick, his thoughts dragging through invisible gravity wells. His vision blurred, not from pain, but from the sensation that something else was looking back through his eyes. Then the ship lurched. Not forward, not backward, sideways through reality. The industrial cores he had released were no longer drifting where physics expected them to be. They had collapsed inward, knotting space-time into a shimmering lattice that surrounded the freighter like a cocoon. Instead of tearing the Iron Promise apart, the overload had created a localized pocket of warp continuity, a sliver of impossible calm in the middle of a dying star's tantrum. The reactor stabilized at 0. Not off. Not on. 0. "Ship status," Kade croaked, forcing air into lungs that felt too small. "Anomalous state detected." The computer replied after a pause that was far too long for any normal processor cycle. "Power output undefined. Structural integrity infinite within local reference frame." Kade barked a laugh that turned into a cough. "You're telling me I broke the laws of physics?" "Correction," the ship said. "You have temporarily rewritten them." The corridor held, glowing brighter than before. Evacuation vessels streaked through in waves, their numbers finally dropping as Aurelian emptied its last remaining launch sites. On the channel, Lyris was breathing hard, but this time the terror had a different edge. "Our final transports are clearing orbit. Kade, we are alive." He closed his eyes, letting that sentence exist in him for a moment. Then he checked the tactical overlay. The star was still dying, and now it was angry. Gravitational eddies battered the improvised space-time cocoon, testing its impossible boundaries. Each impact rippled through the pocket, like a stone tossed into liquid glass. The industrial cores glowed white-hot on the display, burning through energy reserves they technically no longer possessed. "How long can I hold this?" he asked the ship. Local time is no longer linear. Estimated duration, insufficient data. In other words, he was balanced on a miracle that might evaporate at any second. "Kade," Lyris said quietly, "my people are transmitting to the fleet that made it through your door. They are asking who you are, what name to remember." He swallowed. He had never cared about legacy. Soldiers learned early that monuments were for the dead. "Kade Marrin," he said. "Human. That's all they need." She hesitated, then spoke with a clarity that cut through the static. "That will not be enough. You did not only save lives. You changed what my people believe is possible." The corridor flickered. He felt the cocoon shudder, a tremor running through warp space-time as the dying star hurled another convulsive flare at the anomaly he had created. "Containment stability degrading," the ship warned. "Figures," Kade muttered. The last of the evacuation vessels cleared the corridor, their collective signal fading into the safer void beyond the storm. Aurelian was gone from its own orbit, leaving behind a hollow world destined to be consumed. "Kade," Lyris said, her voice breaking with urgency. "The fleet is begging you to disengage and follow. They have prepared a beacon corridor on the far side. You must come now." He stared at the display, at the glowing mass of the industrial cores holding reality together by force of human audacity. "I can't just shut this down," he said. The corridor will collapse instantly. The backlash will tear the pocket apart. Me included. There it was. The party hadn't said out loud yet. Silence filled the channel, thick and heavy. Then Lyris spoke, no longer as a frightened princess, but as something else, something resolute. You crossed the silence for strangers. You tore open a star to save a world you had never seen. Do not tell me now that you are done being impossible. Her words landed harder than any stellar shockwave. Kade, she continued, my people are not leaving you behind. We will not survive that story. The cocoon buckled again, cracks of impossible light crawling across the viewport like veins. The ship's computer chimed once more. Structural failure imminent. Nonlinear solutions required. Kade looked at the corridor, then at the coordinates of the fleet beacon waiting beyond it, then at the woman whose voice had dragged him back into the universe when he'd been content to drift out of it. Lyris, he said slowly, if I try to move this pocket, I might collapse both realities at once. Her reply was immediate. Then do not move the pocket. Move yourself. The idea was insane, which, Kade realized, meant it might actually work. Moving yourself out of broken physics is not a procedure taught in any flight manual. Kade studied the warp readouts while the space-time cocoon flexed around the Iron Promise. The industrial cores were no longer just stabilizing the corridor. They had become an anchor point in reality, and not the universe kept tripping over. To leave it behind without unraveling everything, he needed to do something humans had only theorized about in half-forgotten research papers. He needed to jump without leaving. Ship, he said, forcing calm into a voice that felt too small for the moment. I want a solution that detaches our local reference frame from the anomaly. Query, define our. Kade blinked. The ship's tone had changed. Not emotion, but perspective. Me, he said quietly. Just me. On the open channel, Lyris gasped. You are planning to abandon your vessel. I'm planning to let it do what it does best, he replied. Hold the line. The idea took shape in his mind like a dangerous dream. The freighter could remain as the gravitational keystone while he transferred himself into the corridor's edge, riding the narrow band of semi-stable physics that existed between the pocket and normal space. A human being as cargo. Human physiology will not tolerate exposure to non-local spacetime. The ship said. Human stubbornness will. Kade countered. He disengaged the restraints, each click echoing too loudly in the small cockpit. The air was thin, metallic, humming with energies that had never been intended to brush against skin. Kade, Lyris said softly, if this is a farewell, He cut in before she could finish. It's not. The cocoon cracked again, a luminous fracture tearing across the viewport. The corridor beyond it shimmered, still open, still devouring the last echoes of the dying planet. Kade dragged himself out of the pilot's chair and toward the airlock that led to the cargo spine. His movements were slow, not from fear, but from the way gravity kept rewriting itself every few steps. The deck alternated between featherlight and crushing, as if the ship could not decide how much of him it wanted to keep. He reached the narrow hatch that separated him from raw, unfiltered anomaly. His breath fogged the inside of his visor. Ship, he said, one hand on the manual release. Maintain corridor stability at all costs. When I clear the boundary, collapse the cocoon and follow the fleet beacon. Probability of human survival, 0.03%. Kade smiled behind the glass. That's still better than zero. He keyed the lock. The hatch irised open, and reality poured in. It wasn't vacuum. It was everything at once. Heat without fire. Pressure without weight. A chorus of mathematical impossibilities, scraping along his nerves. His suit screamed as its sensors overloaded, trying to quantify a place where measurement had no meaning. For one terrible moment, he was nowhere. Then he was moving. The corridor wasn't a tunnel so much as a decision. A thin line of coherence stretching between madness and normal space. Kade threw himself toward it, arms and legs useless as spacetime slid around him like oil. His vision fractured into layers. In one, he was drifting free, a human shape dissolving into probability. In another, he was still in the airlock, hand on the hatch. In a third, he saw Aurelian from orbit, whole golden, unbroken, as if the star had never touched it. "Stay with me," Lyris whispered in his ear, her voice somehow threading through the anomaly. "I am here." He clung to that sound. Let it be the only constant. The cocoon behind him imploded in a silent flash, releasing a shock wave of warped gravity that shoved him violently forward. For a heartbeat, Kade felt himself stretching across years he hadn't lived yet, memories he didn't own flashing behind his eyes. Then the corridor seized him. Pain returned first. Then weight. Then the familiar tyranny of linear time. He slammed into something solid, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Arms caught him. Too many. Too delicate. Too warm to belong to a human medic team. "Kate," Lyris cried. No longer a voice in his helmet, but a presence in the same air, the same reality. He opened his eyes to a chamber bathed in soft amber light. Alien figures crowded around him, tall and willowy, their skin shimmering like polished opal. And at their center stood Lyris, her luminous eyes wide, her expression torn between disbelief and something dangerously close to relief. Behind them, far beyond the observation port, the corridor collapsed into nothing. The iron promise was gone. So was Aurelian. Only the survivors remained. Kade did not wake up. He assembled himself slowly, like a story being told out of order. First came warmth, then the sensation of being held in a field that wasn't quite gravity, but behaved politely enough that his body accepted it. Sound filtered in next, murmurs layered with harmonic tones that didn't belong to any human language. When he finally opened his eyes, he was looking into a ceiling that looked back. It wasn't reflective. It was responsive. Threads of light rippled across it in sympathy with his heartbeat, as if the room were curious about him. "You are returned," a voice said gently. Kade turned his head and found Lyris seated beside him. She was different up close than she had been as a transmission, more fragile, more real. Her skin glowed faintly from within, veins tracing patterns that pulsed in time with the ambient light of the chamber. "Am I?" He trailed off, unsure which question he was actually asking. "Alive?" she offered, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Yes, against every projection we possess." He tried to sit up and failed. Invisible force fields caught him, easing him back into the cradle of the med platform. "Do not rush," she said. "Your cells experienced something no biology should endure. Our healers are still debating how you remain coherent." "Human stubbornness," he muttered. It came out hoarse. Her expression softened. "My people are beginning to believe that is a fundamental force of the universe." The chamber's entrance dilated soundlessly, admitting 3 tall figures in flowing ceremonial armor. Their movements were deliberate, synchronized, the kind of precision born from centuries of ritual. The one at the center bore a crest of radiant filaments that flared when it spoke. "I am Sarenval, voice of a surviving conclave," it said, its words translated seamlessly in Kade's ear. "You stand at the hinge of our history, human." Kade managed a tired shrug. "I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Lyris shot him a look that said she disagreed with every fiber of her being. "Your actions," Sarenval continued, "have preserved nearly 700 million lives. Our species has never recorded such an intervention by an outsider." Kade let that number sink in. 700 million. It was too large to feel real. He'd been trying to save a voice. The galaxy had taken him at his word. "What happens now?" he asked. Sarenval inclined its head. "That is complicated. The fleets that escaped now drift without a home star. Our empire was not designed for exodus. Many among us see you as a savior. Others see you as a destabilizing variable." "Translation," Kate said dryly. "Some of your people are scared of me." Lyris folded her hands. "We have legends," she said. "Stories of beings who arrive at the moment of ending and unwrite it. They are never without consequence." As if summoned by the word, a tremor rippled through the chamber. The responsive ceiling flared in erratic patterns. Sarenval's filaments dimmed. "Your presence is causing resonance effects within our infrastructure. The corridor anomaly has left a scar in subspace, and it is following you." Kate's stomach tightened. "Following me how?" The air behind the dignitary warped. light bending inward like a lens focusing on nothing. For a breathless instant, the same impossible geometry he had felt outside the freighter shimmered in the room. Lyris stood abruptly. The pocket, your broken physics, it is echoing. Sarah and Val nodded. Where you go, the anomaly seeks to reassert itself. You are, in essence, a walking disturbance in the fabric of reality. Well, Kate said weakly, that's new. The distortion collapsed, leaving behind a silence thick with unspoken calculations. Our scholars fear, Sarah and Val said carefully, that if you remain within our core habitats, the resonance may grow strong enough to fracture them. So I can't stay, Kate said. Lyris's gaze snapped back to him. No, there must be another way. There is, Sarah and Val replied, but it carries risks we have never tested. Kate closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. He had traded one impossible situation for another. I'm listening. We have a frontier, Sarah and Val said. A network of uninhabited systems beyond our mapped territories. Places where the fabric of space is already unstable, already prone to flux. If you anchor yourself there, the resonance may dissipate harmlessly. Exile, Kate said. Guardianship. Lyris countered immediately. Sarah and Val's filaments flared brighter. We would not abandon you, human. We would build around you. Study the anomaly. Learn from it. You would become the center of a new initiative, one born not of empire, but of survival. Kate looked at Lyris. Her eyes shone with something fierce and unyielding. You crossed the silence for us, she said. Now let us cross something for you. The room trembled again, stronger this time. Hairline fractures of warped light spidered across the ceiling. The anomaly was not waiting for a vote. The first frontier station was built around a man who was not supposed to exist anymore. They called it Havenfall, a lattice of luminous arcs and layered habitats, suspended in a system whose star burned with erratic, beautiful violence. It was the kind of place the Aurelian Empire had once quarantined and forgotten. Now it was home to scientists, engineers, displaced families, and one human who made reality nervous. Kade watched the construction through a reinforced viewport as autonomous frames stitched the station together, each segment harmonizing with the unstable subspace currents that rippled through the region. Every few minutes, the air around him would hum, the anomaly tugging at his presence like a tide testing an anchor. Lyris stood at his side, hands clasped behind her back in a posture that had become habitual since the evacuation. They are building you a world, she said quietly. They're building a buffer, Kade replied. I'm just the problem it wraps around. Her eyes flicked toward him. You are not a problem. You are a beginning. He wasn't sure how to respond to that. The scientific council worked fast. They had no choice. The resonance fields around Kade were growing stronger, bending instruments, disrupting transit lanes, whispering into systems that had never been designed to hear ghosts of broken stars. The solution was audacious even by Aurelian standards. Integrate the anomaly into the station's core architecture, allowing Havenfall to bleed off excess distortion into controlled flux channels that fed directly into the system's unstable star. It was a partnership between catastrophe and calculation. Kade lay inside the resonance chamber as technicians sealed the final layer of adaptive shielding around him. Transparent panels slid into place, bathing him in a soft cerulean glow that made his skin tingle. How does it feel? Lyris asked over the private channel she insisted on maintaining. Like I'm being plugged into a cosmic outlet, he said. You, she hesitated. Like I am watching the birth of a myth while standing inside it. The chamber thrummed to life. Streams of data flooded the observation decks. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the anomaly stirred. Light twisted, folding inward toward Kade, forming delicate spirals that brushed his limbs without touching them. The station systems absorbed the distortion, redirecting it through the flux channels in glittering arcs that fed the star beyond. Stability metrics climbed. Aurelian scientists erupted into controlled celebration. Kade exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since the day he'd opened that first forbidden signal. Looks like your empire just installed a human as a structural component. Lyris smiled faintly. I will ensure that becomes an official designation. Days passed, then weeks. Havenfall grew from a framework into a living city, its architecture shaped as much by the anomaly as by any blueprint. Ships began arriving from the scattered Aurelian fleets, each carrying survivors eager to build something that wasn't haunted by loss. And wherever Kade went, the station bent around him, subtle shifts in gravity, lights flickering in unfamiliar hues, sensors whispering numbers that no longer added up. He became used to it. What he did not become used to was the way people looked at him, some with reverence, some with fear, a few with quiet resentment. "You didn't ask to be this," Lyris said one evening as they watched the star flare beyond the viewport, its chaotic beauty mirrored in the station's glowing filaments. "But you are, and that frightens those who prefer their heroes dead." Kade leaned against the railing. "I was good at being forgotten. You are terrible at it now." The moment fractured when alarms rippled through Havenfall, softer than emergency sirens, but insistent enough to make every conversation falter. Saren Val's voice filled the public channels. "Attention! Long-range arrays have detected multiple non-Aurelian vessels, translating into the system perimeter." Kade straightened. "Non-Aurelian how?" The dignitary appeared on the hollow display, filaments burning with urgency. "Human signatures. Military grade. They are using frequency patterns consistent with deep-core reconnaissance units." Kade's blood ran cold. Humanity had not been part of this story until now. He had crossed the silence alone. Or so he believed. "They've found me," he said. Lyris's eyes darkened. "Why would your people come here?" "Because humans don't leave well enough alone," Kade replied. "And because I broke something no one else could." The first of the approaching ships emerged from hyperspace in a wash of ionized light. Sleek, armored, bristling with scanning arrays that immediately began probing Havenfall's exotic energy signature. Saren Val spoke again, more tightly. "They are hailing us, demanding identification of the anomaly source." Kade watched the human warships maneuver with the efficiency of a species that had learned to survive its own wars. "They're not here to talk," he said. "They're here to contain." Lyris turned to him. "Contain you?" He met her gaze. "Or weaponize what I've become." The anomaly stirred around him, reacting to the distant presence of his own kind. And for the first time since he'd saved a dying world, Kade wondered if humanity would be the threat he couldn't outrun. The human fleet did not broadcast threats. They didn't need to. Their formation said everything. A tightening spiral around Havenfall, weapons powered but not yet aimed, sensor arrays painting the station in layers of hungry light. It was the posture of a species that believed preparation was a moral duty. Kade watched the approach vectors unfold on the holotable, patterns he recognized from training drills he'd sworn he would forget. "They're here for me," he said, "and they won't care how many treaties they break to get a closer look." Saren Val's filaments rippled in agitation. "Our defensive lattices are calibrated for conventional threats. Your people's ships are optimized for the unconventional." The first hail cut through the command deck, crisp and unmistakably human. "This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Reconnaissance Corps. Unknown station. Identify yourselves and transmit all data regarding the space-time anomaly in your custody." Lyris inhaled sharply. "They speak of you as property." Kade stepped closer to the transmitter. "They always do it first." He opened the channel. "This is Kade Marrin," he said, his voice carrying into the silence that followed. "Stand down. You are in sovereign Aurelian territory." The pause was brief. Then Rourke replied, her tone shifting from formal to incredulous. "Marrin, you were listed as deceased following the Red Silence incident. You are the anomaly." "Last I checked," Kade said. "That made me a person, not a payload." "Your condition constitutes a Class Omega security concern," Rourke said. "You will submit to containment for analysis." Lyris leaned in, her voice low and fierce. "They intend to cage you." Kade's jaw tightened. "They intend to make sure no one else like me ever gets to choose." The anomaly pulsed around him, the station lights dimming in sympathy. Havenfall's sensors went momentarily blind as reality itself twitched. Saren Val intervened. "Terran fleet, this individual is under Aurelian protection. Any hostile action will be considered an act of war. Rourke's reply was ice. We are already at war with ignorance. Your people cannot comprehend what you're harboring. A wave of human drones launched from the lead cruiser, sleek shapes accelerating toward the station at speeds that made Aurelian tracking systems stutter. They're deploying containment pods, Kade said, reading the familiar signatures. They'll try to net the anomaly before anyone can react. Then we must react now, Lyris said. She took his hand. The moment their skin met, the resonance field surged, not violently, but with purpose. The anomaly brightened, lines of warped light threading through the station's superstructure, flowing toward Kade and Lyris as if recognizing a circuit that had been incomplete until now. Saren Val stared at the readings. The distortion is synchronizing with her biosignature. Kade felt it too, a stabilizing presence, something that grounded the chaos, turning raw impossibility into a shape he could almost understand. Lyris, he said quietly, what are you doing? She didn't let go. My people are not built like yours. Our neural patterns evolved to harmonize with stellar flux. Perhaps that is why your signal found me. Not by chance, but by compatibility. The first human drone struck Havenfall's defensive lattice, testing it. The station shuddered. Rourke's voice returned, sharper now. Marrin, this is your final warning. We will not hesitate. Kade closed his eyes, feeling the anomaly swell around the space where he and Lyris stood together. For the first time since he'd torn open a star, the distortion did not feel like a burden. It felt like a conversation. Admiral, he said into the channel, you came here because you were afraid of what I am. I came here because someone was dying. That's the difference between us. He nodded to Saren Val. The dignitary's filaments flared, and Havenfall's flux channels reversed polarity. The anomaly poured outward, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. Space between the station and the approaching drones thickened, folding into layers of shimmering distortion that swallowed the devices whole, freezing them mid-acceleration like insects in amber. Human ships recoiled, emergency maneuvers flaring across their hulls. On the command deck, every Aurelian sensor went wild. The readings were impossible, but they were also beautiful. Lyris's grip tightened. We are not breaking your fleet, she whispered. We are teaching a new rule. Rourke's voice cut in again, no longer controlled. What have you done? Kade opened his eyes. I answered a call for help. I'm doing it again. The anomaly expanded, not violently, but deliberately, carving out a zone of altered physics around Havenfall, a sanctuary no conventional weapon could penetrate without unraveling itself. For the first time, the human fleet hesitated, but Kade knew his own people too well. They would not stop. They would adapt. And the universe, once bent, never quite remembered how to go back. The sanctuary held. For 12 minutes, human warships circled the shimmering boundary around Havenfall like predators, pacing a fire they could not cross. Every scan they launched dissolved into noise. Every probe they fired folded into harmless arcs of light that fed the anomaly instead of weakening it. On the command deck, Kade felt the tension sharpen into something brittle. The longer the standoff lasted, the more certain he became that this was not a victory. It was a negotiation conducted in silence. They are studying us, Lyris said, her voice low, learning how to think like the storm. Saren Val nodded grimly. Your people excel at turning fear into doctrine. As if summoned by the observation, the lead Terran cruiser broke formation. It did not attack. It withdrew, just far enough to bring its long-range array fully online. They're switching to conceptual weapons, Kade said, recognizing the configuration. They'll try to map the anomaly instead of breaching it. Rourke's voice returned, stripped of bluster. Marrin, you are no longer dealing with a fleet. You are dealing with a question, and we will not stop asking it. The star beyond Havenfall flared, echoing the rising tension. Kade leaned closer to Lyris. If they crack the pattern I'm using, they won't need to fight through it. They'll rewrite it. Can you stop them? She asked. He hesitated. For the first time since the rescue, the answer wasn't bravado. It was calculation. I can stay ahead of them, but not forever. The anomaly pulsed again, its glow shifting toward warmer hues as Lyris's presence steadied it. The two of them had become a system within a system, a feedback loop of human defiance and alien harmony. Saren Val's filaments flared. There may be another way. Not to win, but to end this. And how? Kade asked. By changing the terms of the question. The dignitary replied. Your people seek to contain you because they perceive you as singular, a lone aberration. What if that were no longer true? Kade understood instantly, and the understanding frightened him more than any Terran weapon. You're talking about replication. Not of you, Saren Val said. Of the bridge between you and Lyris. The harmonized state. If it can be taught, shared, then the anomaly becomes a dialogue, not a possession. Lyris's eyes widened. You would give my people the capacity to shape what he is. And in doing so, Saren Val continued, deny your people the ability to own it. The human fleet's long-range arrays flared to life, bathing the sanctuary in invisible beams of inquiry. They're close, Kade said. If we're doing this, it has to be now. They moved to the resonance chamber together, past scientists who bowed as they passed, past children who stared at the human and the princess as if they were watching myth take physical form. Inside the chamber, the anomaly gathered, luminous threads weaving between Kade and Lyris like the beginnings of a tapestry. Saren Val's voice echoed over the intercom. We will transmit the harmonization protocol to every Aurelian vessel. This will change us. Kade closed his eyes. It already has. Lyris placed her hands over his heart. The moment their pulses synchronized, the anomaly surged, not outward this time, but inward, folding into a coherent pattern that resonated through Havenfall's networks. Across the system, Aurelian ships began to glow. Human sensors went haywire. What is happening? Rourke demanded over the channel. Kade answered before Saren Val could. You wanted to know what I am. I'm a bridge, and I'm not standing alone anymore. On the holo display, Terran analysts watched as dozens, then hundreds, of Aurelian signatures develop micro-resonance fields. Not anomalies. Relationships. You can't weaponize a conversation, Kade said softly. Not without being part of it. The sanctuary boundary shifted, no longer centered solely on him, but on a growing network of harmonized pairs across the Aurelian fleet. The distortion became smoother, more elegant, less a scar, and more a new layer of reality. The human fleet reacted with abrupt caution. Their formations loosened, aggression giving way to something that looked uncomfortably like doubt. Rourke's voice came back, quieter now. You're changing the rules faster than we can write them. Kade looked at Lyris, at the calm strength in her eyes. That's the point. The star flared once more, not in fury, but in rhythm with the expanding anomaly. A cosmic heartbeat that no longer belonged to any single species. For the first time since humanity had found him again, Kade felt something loosen inside his chest. But the readings on the far edge of the system were still climbing, and whatever was coming next would not care about treaties, sanctuaries, or who had started the conversation. The human fleet hesitated at the edge of the sanctuary, but hesitation does not last forever. Kade knew this. Humans were relentless when they had questions, and answers had a way of demanding completion. He could see it in the way their ships shifted, calculating angles, running simulations against a problem they had never encountered before. A human alive inside an anomaly that refused to be contained. Lyris stood beside him in the resonance chamber, her hands still on his shoulders, eyes glowing faintly from the harmonized energy flowing between them. Do you think they'll understand? She asked, voice quiet but steady. Kade didn't answer immediately. He was scanning the holo array, watching the Terran fleet's ships subtly adjust as if testing the limits of the sanctuary. Every probe they sent through the edges dissolved instantly, absorbed into the anomaly. Yet their patterns were clever, almost surgical. No, he said finally. Not fully, but they will respect it eventually. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the center of the chamber, where the anomaly's threads weaved between him and Lyris like living ribbons of light. Then let's show them, he said. Together, they synchronized fully, their pulses aligning with the flow of the anomaly. The threads brightened, spreading outward like ripples across water, filling every corner of Havenfall. The station itself seemed to respond, walls bending subtly, floors adjusting, lights twisting into shapes that resonated with the rhythm of life itself. On the observation decks, Aurelian engineers gasped as their systems aligned with the anomaly. The flux channels smoothed into perfect arcs. The sanctuary boundary, which had once been a shimmering cage, now extended like a living network, embracing all who had survived the evacuation. And across the void, human sensors flared, alarms blaring as their arrays attempted to interpret a phenomenon that had no precedent. Rourke's voice came over the comms again, tense, sharp, but tinged with something unfamiliar, awe. "Marrin, what have you done?" Kade allowed himself a small smile. "I didn't do it alone. This is everyone's work now. You just happened to show up at the right, or wrong time." The first human ship edged closer, careful, testing. But the moment the outer hull passed the initial layer of the anomaly, systems overloaded, sensors fried, and instruments recalibrated against impossibilities. The fleet recoiled. For the first time, the humans saw what it meant to face something beyond their calculations. Lyris took his hand. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them, and they don't even know it yet." "I saved them because someone once saved me," Kade said. He didn't elaborate, but the meaning was clear. Lyris herself, the call for help from Aurelian, and the countless moments of impossibility, they had all led to this. The human fleet held its distance. Rourke's voice, calmer now, spoke again. "We will report this. But know this, Marrin. We do not fully understand what you are capable of. We will not attempt to contain you, but we will follow you. Carefully. Always." Kade nodded, aware of the unspoken acknowledgement. Humanity's persistence had not failed. It had adapted. They would respect what they could not dominate, at least for now. And in that, there was a fragile victory. Havenfall began to pulse in harmony with the anomaly, its filaments glowing brighter as citizens, both Aurelian and human, moved freely through the station, adjusting to the new reality around them. Lyris leaned close. "You've given them a chance," she whispered. "Not just Aurelian, not just me, but all of them." Kade let his gaze wander beyond the viewport, out into the chaotic brilliance of the unclaimed stars. He could feel the anomaly stabilizing, not because he forced it, but because it had learned to coexist with the life around it. A lesson in impossible balance. "I wonder," he said quietly, "if the universe has more SOS signals waiting for me." "You'll answer them," Lyris said firmly, "because that's what humans do, and maybe what heroes do too." He allowed himself to laugh softly. It wasn't a victory laugh, not yet, not fully, but it was the sound of someone who had survived everything and discovered that survival was only the first step toward something greater. Saren Val's voice echoed through the station, ceremonial but warm. "The anomaly is no longer just a threat. It is a bridge between species, between realities, between fear and understanding. You, Kade Marrin, and your companion, have rewritten what is possible." Kade looked at Lyris. She smiled, eyes glowing with the same luminescent intensity as the threads surrounding them. He realized that he had not only saved a planet, a fleet, and a species. He had also found something he had never expected. A reason to stay, to fight, to care beyond survival. Havenfall was no longer just a station. It was proof that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, even when the impossible comes crashing through, there is always a choice to protect, to love, to endure. And Kade Marrin, human among aliens, anomaly among stars, finally allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he belonged. He turned to Lyris. "Let's see how far we can take this." She squeezed his hand. "All the way." Outside the viewport, the first rays of a new star system caught the anomaly in its brilliance, painting the void in colors no human eye had ever recorded. And somewhere, far across the galaxy, whispers of a human who had answered a desperate call began to spread. Not as legend, not yet, but as hope. Havenfall pulsed, once more. The universe bent, but it did not break. And for the first time, Kade Marrin smiled without fear. If you enjoyed this story of impossible bravery and cosmic love, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Soundscape for more human-first sci-fi adventures that bend the universe in all the right ways.